Cuba continues to deploy medical brigades around the world to support the fight against COVID-19. A memorial service for George Floyd was held at North Central University in Minneapolis this Thursday. A Chinese medical team has arrived in the Republic of the Congo to support the fight against the COVID-19 virus. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, and I'm Katrina Goss. Cuba continues to deploy medical brigades around the world to support the fight against COVID-19 in the midst of a strong campaign launched by Washington to discredit the island's international cooperation. This Thursday, it was announced that 21 Cuban health specialists are travelling to Guinea to join the fight against the coronavirus in this African country, which Cuba supported in 2014 during the Ebola outbreak. The new group will join the 11 Cuban medical professionals already working in the country. Another 298 Cuban health personnel are also set to leave for Kuwait, where 36 Cuban health specialists are already working. These two groups bring the total number of medical brigades deployed by Cuba in the context of the coronavirus pandemic to 33 across some 25 countries.
Africa and Cuba are united by the unbreakable ties of a historic friendship, and I am happy to be part of this history and of contributing to strengthen those ties.
We are the Army of White Coats, as our undefeated Commander-in-Chief Fidel Castro called us, and we are today fulfilling one of his missions, internationalism and humanism above all else. The role of women is always fundamental in our country, where we represent 50% of the force in every battle.
And a team of Cuban doctors arrived in Peru this Thursday to support the fight against the COVID-19 virus. The 85 Cuban health professionals of the Henry Reeve International Contingent of doctors specialized in disaster situations and epidemics were received by the ambassador of Cuba to Peru, Sergio González, and Peruvian Health Ministry official Victor Zamora. In the coming days, the medical brigade will be divided to cover the most affected regions of the country. To date, Peru has reported almost 179,000 coronavirus cases, placing 9th worldwide, and nearly 5,000 deaths. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro stressed that Venezuela is the only nation that continues to receive migrants returning to the country during the COVID-19 pandemic, in contrast to the neoliberal policies of other countries in the region.
The only country in the world that is still receiving migrants that are returning to their country is the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. It is the only one. Thousands and thousands arrive every day. Fleeing from what? From the coronavirus, the corona hunger, the persecution, the xenophobia, from the contempt in Ecuador, in Peru, in Chile, in Brazil. Fleeing it.
Ecuadorian health authorities have warned that hospitals in the capital Quito are running at full capacity amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Health Minister Juan Carlos Ceballos noted that there was a peak in demand for hospital beds in Quito, especially in intensive care units. He stated that bed capacity would be expanded to avoid saturation. Meanwhile, health authorities have declared San Cristobal and Santa Cruz, which make up the Galapagos Islands, COVID-19 free zones. Ecuador has officially reported over 40,000 coronavirus cases and more than 3,400 deaths, but according to local reports, these numbers fall far short of the reality. The political and health crisis continues to intensify in Brazil as far-right President Jair Bolsonaro has vetoed the transfer of $1.5 billion to combat the pandemic, while the education minister has been called to testify over his recent racist statements. Our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Ignacio Lemus, has more.
Over the last 24 hours, there have been 1,349 deaths caused by COVID-19, raising the death toll to over 30,000 since the outbreak started. Meanwhile, the total number of cases has surged to 584,000 patients. But these numbers provided by the Brazilian Ministry of Health are very likely far below real numbers due to an overall lack of testing and the fact that the number of death certificates acquired between March 16 and June 3 have been 20 times higher than during the same period in 2019. In particular, there are 6,000 more death certificates citing respiratory problems as the cause of death that was being reported by the Ministry of Health. But despite all this, President Jair Bolsonaro has also vetoed the transfers of $1.5 billion from the national treasury to a number of states and municipalities to combat the coronavirus. Canceling these transfers will have consequences for the people and the health system. The political crisis is also deepening after Education Minister Abraham Weintraub was summoned to appear in court today for his recent racist statement against China.
And Brazilian authorities announced a reopening plan for Rio de Janeiro despite the ongoing health emergency in the country. Outdoors activities such as surfing, swimming and water sports will be allowed, together with the opening of churches and furniture stores. Rio de Janeiro's mayor, Marcelo Crivella, noted that non-essential activities will resume in 6 stages and municipal parks would restart events. As a precautionary measure, bars, restaurants and other non-essential businesses will remain closed. Health authorities have reported more than 54,000 COVID-19 cases and over 5,400 fatalities in the Brazilian state of Rio de Janeiro. Mexico has reported its highest daily COVID-19 death toll yet, at more than 1,000, but the government has stressed the newly reported fatalities occurred on different dates.
Today you may have noticed that we have a substantial increase in mortality. Yesterday we have more than 10,700 and today we have more than 11,000, and that is why we want you to identify very clearly the dates of occurrence.
Chair of the Caribbean Community, Mia Mottley, has rejected what she called the European Union's shame list, which was released last month and includes third states that the EU deems to have strategic deficiencies in anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing. Mottley was speaking during the first extraordinary meeting of the African, Caribbean and Pacific Group of States via video conference on Wednesday.
The governments, my friends, of the Caribbean region reiterate their unequivocal commitment to cooperate with all states in the fight against money laundering and terrorist financing. That cooperation requires recognition by all of our sovereign rights under international law and respect by the European Union for the principles of good faith, equal treatment, non-discrimination and due process, values which we share with the European Union. Left unchecked, the action taken by the EU would further decimate our economies, since our financial and international business sectors are key engines of growth for us in the Caribbean, and I must confess to you, was the only sector yet untouched by COVID until this unfortunate action was taken with the publication of this shame list.
The Caribbean Community has sent an observer mission to St Kitts and Nevis to monitor the general elections to be held this Friday. CARICOM said the mission was sent at the invitation of the government of St Kitts and Nevis. The CARICOM officials are set to meet with the electoral authorities, leaders of political parties and other stakeholders of the country. They will monitor the voting process, including the opening and closing of polls, the casting of ballots as well as the vote counting process. More stories coming up after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. This Thursday saw a memorial service for George Floyd at North Central University in Minneapolis. Our correspondent Jorge Hestoso has the details.
This afternoon at the University of North Central in Minneapolis took place the first memorial to the life of George Floyd. It has been precisely Reverend Al Sharpton, the one who delivered the eulogy, and he was very, very tough against President Trump. He said that he will never accept that they use the assassination of George Floyd as a prop for political purposes. Also denounce once more the long history of racism, discrimination, poverty and injustices that has suffered the Afro-American community. And most definitely he says that this is not going to end up here. It's going to be another event in August here in Washington, D.C. At the same time, the 3 policemen that they were assisting at the assassination of George Floyd were presented in court, and they were officially charged with charges of complicity, precisely of that asphyxiation. Now the 4 policemen are arrested, are in jail waiting trial, and most definitely that has been a very important step because of the demonstrations all over the country that they were saying they want them, the 4 of them, being charged before the funeral, that the final funeral of George Floyd is going to take place on Tuesday in Houston, and definitely is going to be very important. For today, for the 10th day, the demonstrations continue all over the country, and most definitely has been peaceful. But anyway, since the very beginning, we have already 13,500 arrests during this period. We get back to you now.
And US civil rights activist, Baptist minister, talk show host and politician Reverend Al Sharpton expressed his hope that the time had come for change during the eulogy at the memorial service held for George Floyd this Thursday.
But I'm more hopeful today than ever. Why? Well, let me go back. Reverend Jackson always taught me, stay on your text. Go back to my text, Ecclesiastes. There is a time and a season. And when I looked this time and saw marches where in some cases young whites outnumbered the blacks marching, I know that it's a different time and a different season. When I looked and saw people in Germany marching for George Floyd, it's a different time and a different season. When they went in front of the parliament in London, England, and said it's a different time and a different season, I come to tell you, America, this is the time of dealing with accountability in the criminal justice system.
Roughly half an hour before the curfew started in New York City on Wednesday evening, hundreds of people gathered near Queensboro Bridge, where they kneeled in silence for 9 minutes as a tribute to George Floyd.
We have to make a change. When I think of Breonna Taylor, I think of my 3-year-old and my 5-year-old at home right now. Right now. To think that they could be shot just because of the color of their skin. It has to stop. It has to stop.
You want to say it gives you hope, but you want to see change. It has to be something different, because now what we had, once again, we need to see what's going to happen when the marches stop, when the protests stop. Then what happens? Does everybody go back to their separate lives and don't worry until the next incident happens so we can march again?
Russia urged US authorities on Thursday to respect the right of citizens to peacefully protest amid the wave of anti-racist demonstrations sparked by the police killing of George Floyd.
In their attempt to stop looting and other illegal actions, the authorities should not infringe on the rights of Americans to peaceful protest. We would hope that before demonstrating their zeal to defend the rights of the oppressed and dissenters in other countries, the American authorities will start to unequivocally observe democratic standards and respect the freedoms of citizens in their own country. This is long overdue.
Russian President Vladimir Putin declared a state of emergency in the region of Krasnoyarsk after a fuel leak from a thermal power plant. More than 21,000 cubic meters were spilled in the area due to damage due to a diesel fuel storage tank. Russian authorities stressed that emergency services were not alerted to the incident on time as the power station's employees attempted to contain the spill themselves. Rescuers have removed more than 100 tons of fuel, and containment booms are being used to prevent further spread. Meanwhile, the Prosecutor General's office has initiated 3 criminal cases on charges of land deterioration, water pollution and violation of environmental protection rules. The French government met with trade unions and employers' organisations on Thursday to address the economic recovery from the coronavirus pandemic. French President Emmanuel Macron and French Prime Minister Edouard Philippe called the meeting as part of a series of sessions being held with stakeholders to address the COVID-19 economic crisis. Unions have highlighted several requests, including sanctions against companies that disregard COVID-19 safety regulations and support for those furloughed or left unemployed. Forecasts show a fall of 11% in GDP as a result of COVID-19 restriction measures in France.
20 ans, 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 20 ans,
Governing parties in Germany have agreed on a €130 billion stimulus package to kickstart the economy, which has been severely hit by the coronavirus pandemic.
The side of the package will be €130 billion from the years 2020 and 2021, of which €120 billion will be paid by the federal government. So we have an economic recovery package and a package for the future. And of course, on top of that, we are now concerned about our responsibility for Europe and the international dimension.
North Macedonia has reimposed strict restrictions on movement in its capital and other parts of the country after registering a record number of new coronavirus cases. Authorities informed that 101 new coronavirus infections and 4 deaths were recorded over 24 hours, bringing the total number of confirmed cases to nearly 2,500 and the death toll to 145. Health Minister Venko Filippi said a 4-day curfew will be imposed beginning this Thursday from 9 p.m. until 5 a.m. on Monday. During this time, people will only be allowed to leave their homes to visit hospitals or pharmacies. $8.8 billion were pledged this Thursday during the one-day virtual Global Vaccine Summit hosted by the United Kingdom. The money pledged by dozens of governments, non-profit organisations and foundations will go to Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, to protect 300 million children against infectious diseases like measles, typhoid and polio, as well as to ensure any future vaccine for the COVID-19 virus will be available to all who need it around the globe. Leaders of Spain, Italy and Germany participated in the summit and called to contribute significant sums towards the Vaccine Alliance. Gavi was founded in the year 2000 with significant support and development from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. It also received support from the World Bank, the World Health Organization and UNICEF. And we're taking one final break now, but stay with us for more. Welcome back to From the South. Health officials in the Republic of the Congo have expressed appreciation for China's medical support to help the country in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. A team of Chinese medical experts arrived in the capital, Brazzaville, last week. In the coming days, the team will share their experiences in the capital and Pointe-Noire and train personnel, including local government officials and medical workers, in the fight against the virus. The Republic of the Congo has reported over 600 coronavirus cases and 20 COVID-19 fatalities.
We always know that China is a friend we can count on. Today, like all other countries, we are facing the difficulty given the persistence of COVID-19 pandemic. Under such circumstances, the Chinese government still sends support to help us strengthen the capacities of our team to respond to this pandemic.
Senegal's government said on Thursday it would relax an overnight curfew after protests broke out in the capital Dakar against the restrictions imposed almost 3 months ago. Interior Minister Ali Ngouil Ndiaye announced that the curfew would be shortened by 2 hours to 11 p.m. until 5 a.m. and that a ban on interregional travel would be lifted. Wednesday night's unrest followed similar acts in the holy city of Cuba a day earlier, where crowds of people took to the streets to express their opposition to the measures. Ethiopia received over 500,000 masks and other medical supplies as a donation from 5 Chinese companies and the Dongguan municipal government on Tuesday. Local authorities said the donation will play a critical role in helping the city of Addis Ababa overcome the challenges posed by COVID-19.
The support between our two countries is mutual, not one way or one country at the receiving end. We support each other. So from above, we can see that the relationship between China and Ethiopia is really what our two governments called comprehensive, strategic, cooperative partnership. It is strategic as it will make a difference in our development, as its significance goes beyond bilateral. We aim to make our cooperation a model for China-Africa cooperation.
We're very grateful to the Chinese government, people and institutions for your support. We should take the necessary COVID-19 precautions, But if the worst is to come, it is obvious that we need ventilators and ambulances. We hope your support will continue until Ethiopians triumph the fight against COVID-19.
Tunisians were able to return to mosques and cafes on Thursday as the country lifted most lockdown restrictions. Back in March, Tunisia closed its international borders, stopped all movement between towns and cities, shuttered mosques, shops, schools, cafes and restaurants, and imposed a nightly curfew. The North African nation has recorded just over 1,000 cases of the novel coronavirus and 48 deaths. The figures pale in comparison to the nearly 10,000 cases reported in neighbouring Algeria. Given a success in containing the virus, the Tunisian Minister of Major Projects has stated she hopes that foreign tourists will be able to return to the country this summer.
The whole government is in the process of ensuring that, I would say, this mastery, this success in terms of the health situation in Tunisia can be accompanied by a return of the tourism sector, which is an important sector that has been affected in our country, and that there is a return of tourists, and that we can have a good tourist season this summer.
Residents of Toamasina, Madagascar rallied on Wednesday against lockdown measures in the country. The protests resulted in clashes between demonstrators and security forces. The country has now recorded about 900 cases of COVID-19. The government has started to ease some of the restrictions imposed in other parts of the country. However, Toamasina residents are still under lockdown.
People must respect the measures taken by the state and things will work out. But the police are severe and they scare people. That's why people are extremely angry with them. And that's why the situation in Tamatave is tense.
And we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And you can join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Katrina Goss and thank you for watching.